Hello, folks, and welcome to this beautiful day, COVID-19 Recovery, Loan Options, and Forgiveness Strategy, June 17th, 2021. And yes, this is powered by Saks LLP, Saks WA, and S2 Solutions are various companies that are supporting us in this time of the pandemic, and now we're coming through the pandemic. This is our slide that basically tells you that the information that we're giving you is really for general guidance only, so it doesn't constitute the provision of legal advice, tax advice, accounting services, investment advice, or professional consulting of any kind, which in the end means go speak to your advisors, and hopefully we are your advisors. Of course, we're here for you. All right, this is our presenters today. Our friend Josh is not going to be presenting today, but he is going to be having fun out in the golf course. Myself, Todd Polinak, Josh, who is usually on, and Steven Arenberg, my good friend and tax partner. This is our agenda. So we wanted to get back before you to kind of tell you a little bit where we are and where we're going. We're going to be talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, the Employee Retention Credit, Restaurant Revitalization Fund, Shuttered Venue Operation Grant, Injury Disaster Loans, and then where we think we're going, and then some final thoughts. So where are we, or where we are? Let's talk a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program. We know that funding opportunities have expired May 31st, 2021. And the Small Business Administration is now focused on loan forgiveness. And we have seen, folks, movement on the loans that are over $2 million. We have heard of some folks who actually have gotten forgiven. That's good news. We're going to talk a little bit about the Loan Necessity Questionnaire and the SBA audits. So just knowing what to expect, I want to go through just briefly kind of something that came up recently with some of our clients. What happens after you submit your loan, what happens internally with the bank. So the SBA will notify the bank that you, the borrower, needs to provide some additional information. Of course, we've talked about in the past the 3509 questionnaire. We're not going to go through that in detail like we did the last one, but I do want to kind of touch on some of the other supporting information and what really transpires within the bank after they submit your information to the SBA. So what will happen is that the bank is going to be notified by the SBA, and somewhat is going that the information is going to say something like this: hey, Mr. Banker, within 5 days of being notified by us, you must notify the borrower in writing that the SBA has undertaken their review, and if the loans are greater than $2 million, you must include the appropriate version of the Loan Necessity Questionnaire, and you must notify the borrower and advise the borrower to return that form within 10 days, 10 business days of receipt. So we've gotten some of those where our clients have been notified by the bank and they're now filling out the questionnaire. Remember that you have 10 business days, 5 and 5 if you think about it. And then 5 days of receipt of the completed Loan Necessity Questionnaire with all the required responses, supporting documentation, signatures, certification. The bank has to upload that questionnaire and documents in the SBA PPP Forgiveness Portal platform. And then the bank will need to separately input your responses to each question into the web form on the platform. And the good news for the bank is that they don't need to verify or validate your responses or the supporting documentation. Now, talking about the supporting documentation, I'm not going to read through all this. We really wanted to kind of list this out so you have it. And remember, we do send out the PowerPoint presentation and the actual recording after the webinar. I think it's 24 hours, but just this is the list of the information that if you've gone through the process, you know you've had to supply to the bank, and then the bank is going to electronically submit these documents via the forgiveness platform within 5 days after they receive it from you. The SBA has notified the banks that in the future they may request additional information either directly from you or from the bank, and they will then require the bank, if it's to the bank, to request that information from you in writing. And you would then have to respond to the request within 10 business days, again, 5 and 5. And if you don't do that, if you just ignore that email, it's possible that you will not be forgiven, or the forgiveness process will be delayed. So make sure that you're looking for those emails and also contacting the bank. So I want to kind of point out a little bit of some of the additional supporting documentation. What we found from some of our clients is that the SBA is requesting the information that, I guess if you think about it, in the application, it says this is information you should keep but not submit. Well, now they're requesting that this information be submitted. And this is kind of the list of additional supporting documentation. Again, I'm not going to go through all this specifically, but this is the support for the PPP Schedule A worksheet that you had to complete, but now they want all the detail. And we do know that several payroll companies now have this information called the CARES Act reports. So you need to provide this to the bank to provide to the SBA. And the next schedule is kind of the additional records that you need to provide, documentation necessary to support the borrower's loan forgiveness application, demonstrating your material compliance with the PPP requirements, and then also supporting if you could not open up or operate within those periods of time because of some type of directive from the government. And as it says here, the documentation must include copies of the applicable requirements for each borrower location and relevant borrower financial records, which means that you have to support the fact that you were told that you could not open up. So that's to say there's a whole bunch of things that the bank may request from you. Sometimes it's because the SBA is saying they need it. Sometimes the bank, I think, is actually kind of developing and expanding their documentation. So just be aware of that. We want to make you aware that there may be more than you expect when you're asked to submit for forgiveness. I'm going to turn over this next section of where we are to my partner, Steve, on employee retention credit. Steve?
Great. Thanks, Todd. And good morning, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well out there. We just wanted to take this time to remind you of some of the funding opportunities that are out there. This list is by no means all-inclusive, but these are some of the top items that are out there. But we also recommend checking out your local area and local county websites and whatnot. Sometimes the local municipalities are offering incentives in addition to what's being offered at the federal level. So we did want to take this time. First of all, we'll talk about the 2020 employee retention credit, which, as you see, is 50% of the first 10,000 of annual wages. And the small employer versus large employer, that really has an impact in terms of what you can actually include in qualifying wages. Being if you're over 100 employees, it's for paying people that did not work. One of the nice benefits that was put in place at the end of 2020 was that the PPP borrowers were no longer excluded from claiming the employee retention credit. You can't count the same wages. You can use the same person, but you just can't count their wages twice. So there are retroactive opportunities to go back and claim these credits for when they became available all the way back to 2020. You just have to amend your payroll tax returns, but there is generally a 3-year statute on that. So even if you filed them last year, your statutes should still long be running, but don't wait too long. If you do think that this opportunity exists, definitely take advantage of it. Reach out to us, reach out to your advisor, because there's some real benefit here. There's also a 2021 credit. Now there's a credit, we're only listing the Q1 and Q2 credits for this year so far, but the credit was in fact extended throughout the remainder of the year, and we'll touch upon that later. But for now, We're just talking about where we are, and there's a credit available of $7,000 per employee per quarter. So while 2020 is 5,000, 2021, if you multiply 7 times 4, that's 28. So you're looking at $33,000. Now that does impact taxable income, but again, there are opportunities here similar to 2020. You cannot double dip, and where the 100 employee threshold was the big number for 2021 is 500. So there are opportunities here, and what we mean by retroactive opportunities is that you can go back and claim this for Q1 2021, even if you've already filed, hopefully, your Q1 941s, your payroll tax form. So there are definitely opportunities here. That's significant dollars. You do it, and the numbers are staggering, but there's definitely availability there. So we've listed here some ways to claim the credit. You can get an advance. You file it on an originally filed 941 or on an amended 941, and we can help you with all this. Just some other items here, just related to just pieces of the credit, taxable income, and essentially no double dipping with the work opportunity credit. And the other, the second item relates to the Families First Coronavirus Act in terms of qualified sick and family leave wages. Basically, you can use the same person, but you can't use the same wages twice. So something to keep in mind. So the next item is the slides advance, please. My slides aren't advancing. Okay, all right. So we just also listed some best practices here. Make sure you, again, take the time to calculate the credit. And it's just best to claim it on an originally filed 941 if possible, as the money seems to come in faster. Because payroll companies, when you amend those returns, as you see, it's taking longer for the IRS to process these. So just keep that in mind. It may take some time to get your cash. It may take 6-8 months just to get the cash back. So just keep that in mind as well. And this relates to 2020 or 2021 for Q1. So there is impetus to get your Q2 2021 payroll tax return, which is due at the end of July. You want to try to get the Q2 credit on there if you can. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's something that's been in the news a lot for those people, those applicants who qualified. Is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. This was a $28.6 billion funding platform that's administered by the SBA. We have seen the commencement of funding, but the portal application is closed, so you can't apply for additional funding at this time. But we're seeing some movement in there. And if you had seen in the news, there was a lawsuit because there was a prioritization, and somebody sued saying the prioritization was unfair. So the funding may have slowed down temporarily, but we're still seeing movement here. It's a significant amount. You can get up to $10 million or $5 million for physical location. And there's a size standard if you do have affiliates. So something that was kept in mind, so that the kind of some of the bigger chains that all had common ownership weren't able to get the funding, because this was really supposed to be earmarked for the smaller businesses. So here's just a listing of the eligible entities. You see, just a reminder: restaurants, caterers, food stands, saloons, and taverns, and other places where the public assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. There was a gross receipts threshold associated with that as well. The proceeds, you can see, you could actually go back in time for items you had already spent, because you see February 15th, 2020. So you can actually have already spent the money and then basically be reimbursed. And it's essentially for operating costs. You can't go out and expand new locations, new food trucks, whatnot, but you can construct outdoor seating and buy some furniture and fixtures for that purpose. But for the most part, this is to be your operational expenditures, not necessarily start a new business. But you do have, as you can see, in excess of 3 years to spend it. But if you don't spend it in that required time period, you will be required to repay it. Now, we don't know what that repayment will look like, if it's all at once or some sort of note. But we're obviously a long time away from March 11th, 2023. So we'll see. It's something that the SBA will have to get us. But first, let's get the funds in-house. and then we can figure out what's going to happen in March of 2023. So the next one, this was also something administered by the SBA, a smaller populace, if you will, but a $16.25 billion funding, also administered by the SBA for venues that were essentially shut down, your Broadway shows, museums, motion pictures, and you see the different criteria here, but they must have been in operation as of the end of February of last year. So for myself, I really enjoy movies, going to Broadway shows. I like the zoo and whatnot. So I'm hoping that these businesses can be rescued. I hope all businesses can be rescued for that matter, but really, I know that this area, as well as the restaurants and a lot of businesses, really suffered. So hopefully this funding platform, which is still open, will provide some benefit and help these types of businesses get through this pandemic. Again, a listing of what the funds can be used for. It's pretty much operating expenses, so we won't go through all of them, but you see what the purpose here. The next slide lists what we cannot buy funds for, or what we cannot use the funds for, and it's essentially very similar. They don't want you they want you using the money to pay people to keep them employed. I mean, that's really the theme of this in general. That's what we're looking for, not to expand your existing business. So you see what the funds can be used for. And last but certainly not least, we see the economic injury disaster loans, the grants, the EIDLs. This was a traditional loan program. So these are not grants or funding or anything like that. These are traditional loans, a 30-year loan. The maximum loan was $150K, but was increased to $500,000 at the end of last year. You see the interest rates, which range from 2.75 to 3.75%, depending upon if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit borrower. We saw the economic injury disaster grants, which are the $10,000 forgivable advances, which at first were to be reduced from or removed from your PPP. Now it has nothing to do with PPP any longer, so you can claim both and not have any impact on your forgiveness. But now the program is still available, but it's only for certain targeted areas, so it's not available for all borrowers. The companies who did submit for the increase, back to the EIDL loans, the $150K up to $500K, some of them are still waiting for funding for that increase because you could have gone back in time. And we're still waiting to hear. Unfortunately, it's just hard to get real information in terms of where these actually stand, in terms of following up the SBA. But if you are in this position, I think it's just wise to continue following up. And if you need some help there, reach out to us or your advisor. Okay, now where are we going? I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Okay, Steve, where are we going? So where are we going? Funding opportunities, Paycheck Protection Program. Will there be additional funding? PPP 3.0? Question mark. I don't know. We don't know. Employee Retention Credit. American Rescue Plan Act extended the credit through December 31st, 2021, which is what Steve did say. And just so you know, there are new rules for Q3 2021 and Q4 2021 that are forthcoming, and we probably will either be doing a webinar on that or at least releasing some information through our various communication sources or emails. Restaurant Revitalization Fund, will there be additional funding? Unknown. Bill introduced by Congress to add $60 billion in additional funding. The program was oversubscribed. So I guess the answer to that is yes. Since Congress did add $60 billion, there is some additional funding coming. Shuttered venue operator grant, the portal's open. Funding opportunities still remain. So if you fall into that category, you may want to consider that. And regarding the EIDL and other grants, current requests for funding increase have been silent. There is uncertainty surrounding the program. Banks say they are lending. So if you need working capital, then that could be an option to explore again. $10,000 grants are limited to targeted areas. So that's where we stand with EIDL. So let's talk about some final thoughts. I'm going to call Steve up as well to kind of give some final thoughts. again, we wanted just to do an update for you today. But one thing I'll just share is if you have not yet submitted your application for forgiveness, I'm guessing that you're pretty close to that 10-month period before you need to start paying it back. So I would suggest that you strongly consider getting things in order to apply for forgiveness. Of course, we are here to help you, but it is, depending on the size of the amount that you received, it could be a pretty arduous task. It might be easy, but it could also be difficult. So don't wait until the last minute to get things together. That's one thing I wanted to share. The second thing I wanted to share was that depending on what bank or financing source you went through will depend on what information you need to provide. We have gotten a whole slew of different types of requests from different groups. So just know that if you're talking to your neighbor on a golf course, he says, well, that didn't happen to me with my bank. Well, it may be something unique to the bank. It may be something unique to the type of the amount you received, or a whole bunch of things. So we're finding that different banks are asking for different information, and also the SBA is asking for different information from different people. I mean, we've heard even some situations where the SBA is requesting tax returns of owners. So if you can believe that, I do believe that there's been a slight change in the focus by the SBA. The earlier loans that were submitted, I think they got less attention to the ones that are being submitted now. So expect to be ready to provide more information and stuff to your bank to get this cleared up. But the good news is that we have heard several loans that are over $2 million to be forgiven, and not that they can't go back and re-audit you, or audit you, but there has been some clear indication of forgiveness. Steve, you have anything to add?
Sure, thanks, Todd. I think something that we'll be paying attention to, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund as well, that the bill was introduced to Congress, hasn't passed yet. Haven't really seen much movement in that, other than I saw that a bill was introduced. So hopefully that additional $60 billion does come into play, because as we mentioned, the program is oversubscribed. So there was funding requests in excess of $60 billion for only $28.6 billion. So that obviously doesn't work. So hopefully the government can come to an agreement and kind of get the funds into the hands of the people that need it. And I just want to echo what Todd said in terms of getting your PPP forgiveness done. And just because you're requested to fill out the loan necessity questionnaire, this is just a necessary step in the process. Don't get nervous, just fill it out, but definitely consult with your advisors, because you want to make sure that you're including all the information, and we have experience with this. So if we can help, or anyone can help, really do it. It's important, obviously. So those would be my final thoughts for now. I'll turn it back over, Todd, or anything to close with?
No, I think we're good. So let's just go through this last slide. Just so you know, folks, you can go to our website and watch some of these webinars that we've put on in the past couple of weeks. One recently, Tax and Sacks, Q2 major updates, important charitable planning techniques in our current climate, planning now for the estate tax overhaul. We had a lot of folks attend these webinars, but they are on our website, and you can go and visit them anytime you like and get the information and push them forward to your friends. We will be having additional webinars as needed on COVID-19. I think, Steve, that we heard this morning that this is our 30th specific webinar on COVID-19 loan options. Seems like we did more of these, but 30 is a lot. And also remember that you can ask any questions through our COVID-19@saxlop.com web email, and go to our resource center. And that's all that I got for today. Enjoy the beautiful weather. Go out there and do something that's fun, because the weather's nice and life is short. So signing off, thanks for attending our webinar.